We're going to get started in a moment. Before we do, I just want to let you know that we will be recording this meeting. We had a lot of people who expressed interest in these tools, and but were not able to make this meeting. So I just wanted to flag with you that we will record the meeting. You can see the top left, there's a record button there. If you do not want to be a recorder, if you don't want to participate in the meeting, that's fine. Feel free to drop off. We can also send you the recording if you want. But I just want to let you know it's going to be recorded and give you the option to step out if you want to. For anyone who's still here, thank you very much for joining us. And of course, before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet. I'm sitting on Gadigal land, so I pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. On the call today, we have myself. We also have Neil Varcoe, our GNI NewsLab Publishing Fellow. We also have Miguel de Souza, our Teaching Fellow, Anna Freeland, who's our Trends Data Curator, and John Bergin, who is the lead of our training partnership with the Walkley Foundation. And of course, we have our instructor, Anntao Diaz. Anntao gave me an extensive bio that I asked him for last night. It's actually not that extensive, it's 2 paragraphs. Anntao leads the development of the GNI data tools that we're about to dive into, the News Consumer Insights, News Tagging Guide, and Real-Time Content Insights, which have already been used by thousands of news publishers around the world. Those tools were updated recently, and we thought that rather than have me attempt to muddle my way through explaining to you how they work, it would be far better to hear it from the horse's mouth. So our horse today is, in fact, Anntao. Before working at Google, this is something I didn't know about Anntao. He worked in IT consultancy and military aeronautics. He obtained a master's degree in international business from Toulouse Business School and developed its own VR gaming app. So if you have anyone if you're in need of somebody who is skilled in military aeronautics and VR gaming apps, as well as GNI data tools, Anntao is your man. I only know him as the effervescent who sits at the other end of the video calls whenever I have a question to ask him. Quick housekeeping, please keep yourself on mute during the call. If you have a question, drop it into the chat. And with that, let's get cracking. Anntao, over to you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, and hi everyone. It's great to be here. That was quite an intro. I'm actually prouder of the VR gaming app, which had like 30 downloads, than my experience in military aeronautics, but I feel that's another story. It's great to be here. I'm based in the US, so it's a bit late. It's 7 p.m. I know it's early for you, early-ish. It's 10 a.m. if I got that correctly. We're gonna talk about data. I know some of you might be thinking, wow, we're gonna talk about data on a Thursday morning. I promise I'll keep this as insightful and particularly entertaining as I can. I'm not one of those persons who get excited with data, but I get really excited about the tools that we've built for news publishers. So hopefully that might be a bit contagious. I have 2 warnings and disclaimers for all of you before I begin. The first disclaimer is I'm working from home and my Wi-Fi is what it is. This is a time where a lot of families go on to Netflix here in the US. So it might drop. If it does, we have a plan B and a plan C for Wi-Fi purposes. So don't worry, be patient with me. I'll come back. That's my first warning. The second warning that I have, and that you might have already realized, I'm half French, half Argentinian, English. I'm not a native English speaker. So there's going to be a lot of grammar errors, weird words. So I apologize for that. If there's something that sounds weird, or blurry or doesn't make any sense, just call me out. There's about 40 of us today. Feel free to unmute or use the chat button. Everything that I'll show is hopefully valuable and simple. So if it doesn't sound simple, is that I did a terrible job of explaining it. So call me out and ask again. There are no wrong questions here. That takes me actually to the Q&A session. I know Neil is going to be our video DJ with the Q&A at some point. I'm also particularly enthusiastic about questions during the presentation. So once again, if you need to interrupt me, go ahead. Let's make this as lively as possible. And to make it as lively as possible, you can see I'm sharing my screen. I think I have 2 slides for you, maybe 1. And then what I'll do is I'll go straight to the tools, and I'll be doing live demos, right? So as a live demo, I'll take off my Google hat and I'll try to put on let's assume I'm a news publisher hat, and try to use the tools that we've built, like if I had a news site, essentially. Hopefully that will give you a more realistic feel of what you can do with our tools. Before I start, and this is why I use my slide, by the way, you'll see me looking here because I have 2 screens, not because I'm just being weird. I want to take a a few minutes just to do an intro of where we're coming from, right? Because we talk about data, there's a lot of people talking about data, and that doesn't necessarily mean we're talking about the same things. Right? So what are we trying to achieve? I'm going to simplify to an extreme, almost to an insulting extreme, what you do. Right? If I look at a publisher business performance, let's try to split it and go from there. Let's try to deep dive together. Right? So one chunk of revenue, right? Your business performance is based off your ad revenue, right? You probably all have an ad revenue source. So ad revenue is what drives business performance, right? And also, I guess, as a primary source or as a complementary source, you have a type of reader revenue source. And by reader revenue, I mean contributions, subscriptions, memberships, memberships and contribution being more of the flavor these days, but that's what you're focusing on. So let's take let's continue deep diving. On the ad revenue side, well, your ad revenue, right, is a function of your advertising strategy and your ad impressions, right? You have ad impressions, you need to define, do I hire a sales team to sell ads? Do I use programmatic ads? All of that will impact ad revenue. On the other side, on the reader revenue side, well, first you have content, and with the content comes certain values, right? And values and content will have a massive impact, of course, on the reader revenue that you'll generate. But on top of your content, you also have specific UX things, right? Do you have an app? Do you not have an app? Is your site fast? Is it not fast enough? There's things that impact the users, and that will also impact how they perceive your content and how they perceive your brand, which will impact if they're willing to pay or not for your content. On top of that, and finally, there's also the marketing piece, right? The pricing, strategy, if you have a subscription model, the packaging, and by packaging, I mean, what do you actually put behind every package? Like, do you do newsletters? Do you provide access to archives, to comments? All of that also matters, even with a membership model, right? If you want to grow and if you want to depend on your reader revenue. So once again, I'm keeping it super simple. It's more to illustrate where we're coming from. So let's go a step, keep on digging on each one, right? So back to ad revenue. Well, before ad impression, you need page views, right? You need a user to come to your site, to come to an article, which will create a page view. If the page view is created, it will create an ad impression. And on the ad impression, you have your advertising strategy, which creates the ad revenue. So the page view is the basis of it all. On the right-hand side, on the reader revenue side, if I go to the lower level, well, it's about loyalty and trust. If I don't know you, if I don't trust you, if I don't have any specific feelings regarding your content or who you are, if I don't have an emotional bond with your brand and with your content, all of the rest, right, is completely redundant or not super valuable. Right, that's what we believe, at least from our perspective. We believe that loyalty and trust is the proxy to any reader revenue strategy. Now, where it gets interesting is that those two things actually meet, right? They meet at what we call user engagement. Getting users to come back to your site, right? More often and more often, or getting users once they're on your site to stay longer, to read more content, right? Instead of having all of your users read one article per visit, what about having them read 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 articles per visit? Through all of that work on user engagement, you are growing page views for sure, right? To each article read and visit created, you're creating page views, and you're also acting on the loyalty and the trust, and you're growing that emotional bond. So what we've tried to do about 3 years ago when this all started was, well, I don't know how many of you have looked at a Google Analytics account or any data source, any graph, right? And you say, or you think, that's an interesting data point, but what do I do with that? Like, what is it actually informing? We felt that there was a need to transform data into action, right? To transform data into concrete things you can do on your site, essentially to drive user engagement, to make your users come back, and once they're on your site, to make your users stay longer. Because we believe that by focusing on user engagement, you will drive both ad revenue, if that's where you want to, or what you want to drive, or what you have, or reader revenue, if that's a revenue source that you have or that you're thinking about. So once again, this was my clumsy short intro to kind of show you like where we're coming from a data perspective and what we're trying to achieve, right? Our goal is to maximize user engagement, and hopefully through the tools that I'll be showing you, and actually through the tool that I'll be showing you, you will see how we look at that. So 3 years ago, we built a tool called News Consumer Insights. Maybe some of you have seen it or have used it. I hope you have, and if you haven't, that's perfect. That's why we have this meeting today. As I mentioned in my clumsy intro, News Consumer Insight has one goal: to help you maximize reader engagement and reader revenue primarily across your site. The idea is that we're going to take your data and transform that into recommendations. This is kind of like the glory slide. We've been around for about 3 years. We launched a new version in June. We've published more than 16 case studies across the last 3 years. To give you a few, Business Insider magazine, I know, but Business Insider, by using News Consumer Insight, they grew their subscription revenue by 150% in 1 quarter. Something that I'm really proud of at zero cost. This was not about telling them, hey, you should spend on AdWords or you should spend on YouTube. So at zero cost, just focusing on reader engagement and barely using any Google product, actually not using a Google product apart from News Consumer Insight from a data perspective. Another example, Lee Enterprises, which is a local news publisher in the US, we multiplied their subscriptions month over month by 3x. Same story, zero cost and barely using any Google product. We have a lot of those case studies on the sites. I won't show them to you, but I'll show you how to access. We wrote them for them to be really actionable, so not very philosophical. So I would really invite you to check them out because all of the steps that what was done is very detailed on those. We actually had the privilege of being recognized by associations. So we were finalists last year for the Digital Media Awards in the best use of audience insights. And we got the 2nd place for the INMA and the News Association, the Global Media Awards for best use of data, which is a long way of saying, it's been going pretty well and we've seen news publishers get value out of this. So now this is the part where I leave the slide and I'm going to do a live demo. So this is the URL. I know it looks weird, but it's goo.gle, so Google/data tools. I'm going to go there with you. I'm going to switch screen. So this is the URL. I'm going to give it a second. I'm going to be patient with my Wi-Fi. So as soon as you come to this page, you will see the 3 tools. News Consumer Insight, Real-Time Content Insight, News Tagging Guide. They all have a different purpose. I will focus on today on News Consumer Insight. We have a 2nd session, I believe it's next week, but I might be wrong. Yes, I'm getting a yes. So we'll focus on Real-Time Content Insight. This one is on News Consumer Insight. If you scroll down, you will find all of our case studies here. They all talk about reader engagement with different type of publishers, impact on ad revenue, on reader revenue, whatever is more appropriate to you. I would really invite you to check them out. So this is why I take off my Google hat and I assume I'm a news publisher. And let's click on News Consumer Insights. So I'm going to click on Try Now. And by the way, if you have questions at this stage, don't forget the chat box or even unmute. I'm super happy to answer all of your questions. I'm going to zoom in It's actually pretty okay from what I can see on the Hangout. But this is News Consumer Insight, and I'm going to show you how it works. So you can see it says not connected to Google Analytics. You do need a Google Analytics account to use News Consumer Insights. You can use a free version. You can use the 360 version. The tool will understand and adapt the insights and customize the insights. So what I'm trying to say is you don't need the paid version of Google Analytics to use News Consumer Insights. We really wanted to build something that works for the vast majority of news publishers, which is why the tool understands if you have the free version or the 360 version. I'm going to close that. And this is what I see. So I'm going to describe what I see. I see 4 pages. Actionable recommendations. This is where I am currently. Reader engagement, reader revenue, and video insights. The video insights page might not be relevant to you if you don't have video content. Otherwise, maybe there are things to do there. We'll see that maybe later. So that's the left-hand side of the page. I see a button here that says default data. Click to select your data. I see a time frame, an English drop-down. So it all starts with this button here, right? If you click on click to select your data, the tool will show you the Google Analytics accounts that are associated with the email that you're using to connect to the tool, right? So if you come to the tool with an email address associated with your Google Analytics account, as soon as you click on this button in a drop-down menu, you will see your own. If I were to click, and I won't, you would be seeing all of the publishers that work with my team and that have granted us access to your Google Analytics account. There is no secret tool at Google to have access to your Google Analytics account. We need to be granted it directly. My team works directly with many publishers around the world. So if I were to click on this button, I would be seeing only the Google Analytics accounts that I have access to. Now, if you right now click on this button and select your Google Analytics account, I want to be crystal clear. You're not sharing anything with Google. You're not sharing anything with myself or my team. It's for you and for you only. We don't collect. We don't store anything. As soon as you close the window, once you've loaded your data, everything will be deleted and everything disappears. But if you do connect your account, what the tool is going to do is going to capture everything and, of course, update it to show you your data. So I'm going to use, you can see it says you are viewing demo data. I'm seeing a question from Ash, so I'm going to take it. It is happening to me and a few publishers that we are working with. What do you do when after you select the Google Analytics report and view this report said there is no data? So that can be due to 2 things. One, that there's really no data, though I think that's pretty easy for you to check. Sometimes when you connect to Google Analytics, that's due to the way Google Analytics, the servers operate, you will see errors. So if you do see an error, try again, give it 5 minutes, give it 2 minutes, try again in an hour. It has to do, it's kind of like traffic, right? You're on a high traffic moment, so we have to be patient. It usually solves itself pretty easily. And if not, you can hit me an email. I'll give my email address afterwards. So I'm going to look at demo data. So let's assume that I've connected my Google Analytics account and you are looking at my data from my site, right? So let's see what the tool does. So the first thing it does is, you can see the images here. It applies a funnel to the audience, to your audience, so to my audience in this case. Now, the funnel this is looking at the last 30-day data, right? So we take all of the users or my users in the last 30 days, and we split them in 3. We split them in something called your casual readers. A casual reader is someone who, through the last 30 days, came once and only once, right? So 1 visit reader. And you can see I have 80% of my total readers that are casual readers. So this is saying that out of all of my users in the last 30 days, 80% connected once to my site, and only once. And when I say connected, I mean visited, right? A second segment is called loyal readers. They represent 19% of my total readers. A loyal reader is someone who came at least twice to my site. Pretty easy. Finally, I have brand lovers, and brand lovers are users who came to my site at least 15 times across the last 30 days, right? and they represent only 1% of my total readers. Now, the definition of those segments can be seen when you put your mouse on top of this thing. You can actually upload them to Google Analytics. So if I were to click on this button, I would be seeing the brand lovers right in my Google Analytics account, if that's something that you want to play with, essentially. Now, we're not going to focus on the rest. I'm going to focus on the card on the left. The card on the left is here to help you digest the data that you're looking at. So let's read it together. Your loyal readers and brand lovers represent 20% of your audience, right? So my loyal readers and my brand lovers represent 20% of the audience. 19 plus 1. Okay, so 20% of my audience are loyal readers and brand lovers, pretty clearly. They drive 80% of your page views and 85% of your ad revenue. So essentially, this is saying that a very small chunk of my audience every month drive most of the value, right? And by value, I mean page views, so content read, and ad revenue. Now, if you don't have Google Analytics 360, the ad revenue line will disappear. So you will only see readers and pages. And that's just a small footnote. So once again, this is saying that most of my users are not bringing that much value, right? My casual readers, 80% of my total readers, are only generating 20% of my pages and 15% of my total ad revenue, right? That's not necessarily bad news per se, but the punchline here is what it says on the card. You need to grow your reader engagement to push your casual readers down the funnel. I need to transform those casual readers, those users who come once and only once to my site every month, into loyal readers, right? I need to invite them to come back with certain tactics on reader engagement. And then I need to transform those loyal readers into brand lovers. By doing so, right, I'm growing my ad revenue for sure. I'm growing the page views, the content they consume, so I'm growing loyalty. So at least I'm working on their potential appetite to subscribe or to donate if you have a contribution or a membership model, right? Now, some of you at this stage might be thinking, okay, this is not, super advanced in terms of data. It's pretty light, and you talk about turning casual readers into loyal readers. Like how do we do that? How do I get there? Now I'm going to scroll down, and this is what I see. 8 recommendations to help you improve reader engagement. Now, that 8 here could have been a 7, could have been a 5, a 2, a 3. This is completely custom to the data that the tool is seeing. So this is my data, and apparently News Consumer Insight for my site has found 8 recommendations. So the way it works is News Consumer Insight is doing a diagnostic of my Google Analytics account in the background. Right? So while you connect your account, News Consumer Insight does that diagnostic, and based off that diagnostic, will surface certain recommendations, so customized to your needs, essentially, and what we've seen from your data. Now let's look at a few of them together. Now it does say to help you drive more reader engagement. So of course, those 8 recommendations are split between you need more visits, you need those users to come back, and you need longer visits, right? So under the need more visits, you can see this is the first recommendation, your newsletter traffic is low. Second recommendation, you should offer web push notifications to your user. I'm not going to do them all because we'll be here all morning or all night for me. You can see third, fourth, fifth, like things like your page load time is high. So the tool did a speed test in the background to identify if your site is fast enough, essentially. Or you should improve your recirculation strategy, right? So your users are not reading enough content every time they come to your site. Now, some of you might be thinking, those are not really recommendations, they're more conclusions based on the data that you've seen via News Consumer Insight. And you would be right. The recommendation appears when you click on it. So I'm going to click on your newsletter traffic is low. And for each conclusion or recommendation, we show you, and this is where I zoom out a little bit. There you go. We show you an example of what we consider best in class, right? And a few things to focus on. Now, let's take a step back. Why are we talking about newsletter traffic, right? If you've read and if you've looked at what type of users are very valuable in the news industry across news publishers and actually across other industries too, newsletter traffic, users who subscribe to your newsletters, come again and again and again. So if we get to the conclusion that newsletter traffic is very valuable, that those are the best type of readers you can get online, then the simple conclusion is then we need to focus on that as news publishers. We need more newsletter traffic. So the tool identifies how many users are coming from newsletters and show you or tell you, well, that's pretty low. You might want to focus on certain things on your site to drive your users to subscribe to your newsletters. And it's as simple as that. This is a mock, of course. The Daily Globe does not exist. But this is what you need, a simple sign up widget on every single article. And this is where I once again mention the product agnostic part. Google does not have a product for this, right? Actually, your email campaign managers can probably give you this for free, right? And if you don't have that from a technical perspective, this is just creating a form for users to sign up. This is ABC for a developer, right? Now, there are specific things you want to focus here. Typically, the visibility and position of the box. Once again, if newsletter traffic is the most important thing you can have, then subscribing to your newsletters is potentially one of the most valuable actions a reader can take on your site. So by default, it should be prioritized, which is why the visibility, right, sign-up box should be easily discoverable across articles and above the fold. This is something that every single reader should see when they read an article. It should be within the content, above the fold, easily discoverable. On mobile, right, you might want to focus on anchored format. An anchored format is when that little box appears at the bottom of the screen on your mobile. Why at the bottom? Because when you hold your phone, you're probably holding your phone like this, right? So your thumbs are at the bottom. So you want stuff at the bottom because it's really easy to click on it. Number two, you want to reduce the number of fields and you want to implement a one-click sign-up. So number of fields, many publishers tend to ask for first name and last name, right? Focus on email, right? When you ask for more stuff, you're adding friction. Adding friction is reducing the amount of potential users that will actually sign up. Focus on the email. Autofill, the one-click. So Stephanie asked if there is a way. Yes, they're in the tool, and I'll ping you the tool. I'll send it in the chat box, but everything is there. There's actually a playbook that I'm going to show you in a second if you want to print that. And I was about to say read that while you're commuting, but obviously commuting these days is not a thing. So through the weekend maybe. So the one-click sign-up, right? The autofill. You might have noticed on certain sites when they ask you, when they have a form, you don't even need to write stuff, right? You just tap it, click it, and your email appears. That's called autofill. Super easy to implement and increases the amount of sign-ups dramatically. Because literally, I don't have to think about what email or write it. I can just click it, my email appears, and I put it in. The look and feel. Right? Contrasting colors. Unlike other things on your site, your newsletter signup should be seen. You want contrast. The background, if your article's background is white, you want this thing to have a black background for contrast. You want it to be seen. Typically, the button colors, right? Don't use your template colors. Use red, use orange, use yellow. Those are colors that drive emotion. Emotion is good. Emotion leads to action. That's why Amazon has orange colors, not because it fits their templates. It's their template that matches the color of their conversion buttons, right? Amazon. Orange, red, yellow are colors that overperform when you want users to click on something. Of course, if your template is all red, that will never work, right? Because then everything is red and it's really hard to see one from the other. Finally, personalize the message. There's things that are better than just, subscribe to our newsletters. You could say, be in the know or be the first one to know what's going on in your area, in your city. Personalization with your values and the values of your content is key here. There's a learn more button. Let's click on learn more. When you click on learn more, we take you would take you to the playbook. The playbook is loading. My Wi-Fi is trying to follow. It's not that long. There you go. So the playbook for each recommendation will take you to what you're seeing here, right? I'm on newsletter. You're seeing a repetition of what you saw in the tool, right? Why it matters, reason one, reason two, reason three, this is more for context, right? So for example, readers from the Boston Globe, and this comes from the Boston Globe, are 10 times more likely to become subscribers than any other type of readers, more than Google traffic, more than Facebook traffic, Twitter traffic, and other traffic. Like this is the best valuable traffic sources you can get. So once again, the reasons here are just for context. In the playbook, you'll also find some more common observation. For example, Facebook Instant Articles allows you to easily implement an email sign-up box. If you have Facebook Instant Articles, they have this little thing, which is an email sign-up widget. Very easy to implement if you do have Facebook Instant Article, and works great because we've tested it, which is why we call it out on comments observation. The goal here is to drive signups by any means necessary, obviously respecting UX. So this is something that you should definitely try out. Now, there's always a second page to every recommendation where you will find more best-in-class examples, or what we call best-in-class example, which is essentially other types of implementation that we know work, right? So for example, this is the anchored format that I was mentioning, right, at the bottom of the screen. This is a light-up box, what we call lightbox prompt, and this is a full screen takeover. The full screen takeover, of course, has an impact on user because no one likes things that take over the page. But having said that, it works really, really well. So it's a opportunity cost, right? To every recommendation, a case study, a real case study from us. You can click on it and you'll be able to see what WRAL, which is a local broadcaster in the US, did just to drive plus 15% newsletter subscribers. Actually, I might be able to show you. Let's go to WRAL. And now there's a Murphy's Law every time I do this where it never shows up. Let's see if I'm lucky. I'm going to go into an article and see if what we said applies, right? So I'm going to scroll down. Of course, it doesn't show up. Oh, yes, it did. Sorry. So I'm at the end of the article, right? And you can see here, get coronavirus update. It's red. So from a color perspective, it works. I would work on the contrast of the box, but at least there's a box on every single page, right? And they have auto fill enabled. So I don't even need to write this, right? Submit, and that's it. I'm subscribed. Cost close to zero, like super simple to implement. And there are things that we think they could improve, like put this a bit above the fold, because here you're literally betting that users are going to make it to the end of the article, which in most cases they don't. So I would really put this above the fold a bit higher, because if they don't reach the end of the article, they will never see this box. So you have a box for nothing. Missed opportunity. So I'm going to close this, and I'm going to go back to that, and I'm going to go back to News Consumer Insights. Now, that's only one article, and some of you might be thinking, okay, so Google doesn't have a product, where does this come from? So 3 years ago, when we started building this, we went to see one news publisher. I was based in France at the time, and I asked this news publisher from the south of France, hey, we're trying to build something for you from a data perspective. Could I get access to your Google Analytics account? They said yes, which gave me access to see how they were doing. And then I repeated this operation with thousands of publishers throughout 1 year, right? So during a year, the only thing I did was ask publishers if I could get access to their data to build a tool for them. That allowed me and myself to have an interesting view in terms of, for example, on getting users to come every single day. Who's the best publisher out there, right? On getting users to stay a long, long time on the site. Who's the best publisher out there? What we did is we identified the best of every single topic. And 3 years ago, once we had identified, the publisher, for example, who was the best at making their users come back, right? We asked them a simple question. How are you doing this? Like, what's the tactic that you're clearly really good at and the rest of the industry that we have access to is not? Their answer is the recommendation that you're saying. That's where the secret sauce of News Consumer Insight is. None of this was built in a closed room with Google engineers. All of this was built in close collaboration with news publishers. Our recommendations come from the best in class in your industry. And that's why they're rarely linked to a Google product, because this has nothing to do with Google and everything to do with how you are engaging with your readers. And I'll close the parenthesis here.
Anntao, I just wanted to jump in and give you a chance to take a sip of water and a breath. There's also a question from Scott Purcell on those recommendations. So Scott's asked, do they disappear once you've taken an action on them? So if they apply the newsletter recommendation, does that then disappear from the console? How does it work?
That's an excellent question that we get a lot. It will disappear if the tool, if we assume essentially that you fixed it, right? So for example, I'll give you an example. Your page load time is high, right? That's one of the recommendations. And if you remember how News Consumer Insight works, you click on it and we'll tell you what you should be looking at, right? From a page load time perspective. What is the tool? I'll tell you how it works in the background. What is the tool actually doing? The tool is looking at if your speed is above or below 3 seconds, right? So if you work on your speed and you are below 3 seconds, that recommendation, as soon as you're faster, will completely disappear. But as long as you're still above 3 seconds, it will continue appearing. Now, the thing is, if you, let's say you are at 12 seconds today of speed, right, of latency, and you fix it to be 5 seconds, which is a massive improvement. And 5 seconds, to be fair, is actually a pretty good score from a speed perspective in the news industry. Now, does it matter or not if the recommendation appears or disappears? I would say no. You fix most of your issues on speed, which brings me to a broader topic. This is directional, right? This is meant to be directional. We have a tool that essentially is meant to apply to every news publisher on the market. So by definition, it also doesn't apply to you perfectly, right? So when you look at News Consumer Insight, look at the recommendation, right? When we say we believe your newsletter traffic is low, right? Look at the recommendation, pay attention to what we're saying you should do, and then go to your site and see, like, are there things you can optimize and fix to improve that newsletter traffic? For example, that specific recommendation, newsletter traffic is low, comes up if your newsletter traffic is lower than 5% of your total traffic. Why 5%? Because the best publishers that we work with, they are above 5%. And that's where we got the rule from, right? Now, once again, if you improve your newsletter traffic, and the recommendation still appears, that doesn't mean, it's dramatic. It means continue doing what you're doing, and through time, hopefully, that recommendation will disappear because we will have concluded that you've done, that you're actually doing a great job on newsletter. I hope that answers the question. That was a bit of a clumsy answer. Okay, so I'm just going to show you 2 more things that I think are relevant because awesome, Scott. I've talked about reader revenue, and some of you might be thinking, okay, he's talking a lot about reader engagement, but what about reader revenue? Well, if you scroll down a little bit, I'm going to scroll down. 7 recommendations to help you improve reader revenue. That's where the reader revenue recommendations are. So we leave the world of reader engagement, and this time we focus on what you're trying to sell, right? Or the membership that you're trying to drive. Typically, I'm going to show you one only. Optimize your landing page on desktop and tablet. The landing page being the page where you show either your membership packages or your subscription offers, right? Landing page is a critical work. You ask any e-commerce player, they have people who are working 24 hours on that landing page where they're trying to sell you a TV, optimizing every single detail, which is a work that you should do too, obviously, hopefully not 24 hours or 7 days a week, but it's a critical amount of work because it's where your users are faced with things they can buy. And if I click on it, optimize your landing page on desktop and tablet. I don't know why this is selected. What did I do? There you go. So this actually moves if the Wi-Fi allows. We're showing you the template of things that matter from a conversion perspective in the news world. I'm going to show you actually this example live. I talked a bit about Business Insider and the impact we had on the subscription business. Most of it was focusing on reader engagement. Another key element of it was designing this. We didn't design, well, we did a very ugly design with the key element, and then they got a professional to do it. Everything matters here. For example, I will invite you, for those who have a subscription business, and if you have a membership model, I will invite you to do the same. Go to your landing page where your users see your packages. If you don't see this, right, cancel anytime, very clearly, very easy to spot, that's something you should be adding right away. For any recurring payment model out there, the #1 benefit expected is cancellation anytime. So it should be super, super clear. Cancellation anytime means a lot of things for a lot of different companies, right? I've subscribed to the New York Times and their crosswords. It said cancellation anytime. It took me 4 months to unsubscribe, but I could cancel anytime. So this is a key element. Just by adding cancel anytime, you can have an impact on how many membership or subscriptions you're trying to sell. Look at this, take 20 step backs away from your screen. And you can see that from a design perspective, we push your eyes to focus on the middle, right? For example, it's the only button that has the orange color, right? The other ones, it's more like I can mouse over it, but no colors here. You can see it's the only one that says best offer. Actually, it's the typical free options, right? But it's the only one that pops out, right? There is a glow effect. Why is that? I'm going to use a terrible example that I should never use with all of you because I respect your industry too much, but I'm going to use it anyway. If you go to any fast food restaurant, they're going to ask you the question, do you want a small, a medium, or a large size? Why do they do that? As human beings, we hate decision-making. The option in the middle is the one that has the least amount of decision-making, right? So focusing elements in the middle, putting what you care about in the middle increases the options that users digest this quickly. You have 10 seconds to make a connection. So I will invite you to look at your landing page and look at how much stuff you have written there, right? There should be 2 key elements. Bond, emotional bond, values at the top, cancellation anytime at the top, and then the rest. Focus on the middle panel and everything else will follow. Once again, the playbook on these specific things, you can see things that I've asked, remove commitment that I've talked about, emotional bond, they're all here. Everything that I'm saying out loud is in the playbook and in the tool. So I would really invite you to check it out if you want to learn more about it. And it's the same example, on every single topic, on optimizing your checkout flow, on where we show you, what we think is the best in class and how we have impact on that, on the landing page on mobile, because obviously on mobile, you have less space than on a desktop landing page. So I'm going to stop here with the recommendations. They're also completely dynamic, but even if they're not, or not good enough for you, just check out what they actually say. I think you'll find value there. Some of you might be thinking, okay, you talked about data-driven tools. We haven't seen a lot of data so far. And that's by design, right? We believe that data is only valuable when you can act on it, which a lot of people might not agree. That's my philosophy, at least, which is why we have built that decision engine to show you those recommendations before anything else, right? We show you this funnel with your data, so your data will show with the funnel to show you why it's important, and then we go straight after the recommendation. But some of you might say, yeah, but I actually want to figure this out too, or I want to see how you got there. That's why we have the other pages. That's why we have reader engagement, reader revenue, and video insight. If I click on reader engagement, you will find the same funnel, right? But this time, we actually show you the data. So we actually show you, for example, gender. Are they primarily men, primarily women? What's the age range of my loyal readers versus my brand lovers versus my casual readers? Because not every reader is the same. They don't interact with your content in the same way. So they shouldn't probably not be addressed and engaged with in the same way. Instead of showing you percentages, you remember when I was saying 20% of users or 80% of users, this time we actually show you the actual numbers, the absolute values, right? Page views, the same. Ad revenue stuff for those who have GA360, otherwise that part will disappear. And finally, their behavior. How long do they come? Every 30 days. Remember, everything is every last 30 days, right? So how many visits did they generate across the last 30 days? How long did they stay? The visit length. How many pages did they see per visit? Do we have a recirculation issue? The cards on the left are always there to help you digest everything. They're always linked to a recommendation on the first page. So it's all about, looking at the data, reading the card that is here to help you digest all of that, and going back to the first page. Because at the end of the day, it's about the recommendation and not the data points. I'll scroll down a little bit, but this goes in a lot of details. Where are your readers coming from and which traffic source is the most valuable, where you will see this bubble graph where we put all of your traffic sources. So instead of looking at users, we look at where they come from. So on the horizontal axis, how many users we actually represent, right? So for example, this little bubble here is Facebook. So on my fake demo account, right, Facebook represents 28% of my total traffic every month, which is why it's so on the right? But on the vertical axis, we have ARPU, average revenue per user, from an advertising perspective. Unfortunately, that's kind of like the limit of the model. This is for Google Analytics 360. If you have Google Analytics 3, you will see pages per reader as a vertical axis, right? So essentially value. So are you very big as a traffic source on the horizontal axis? Are you very valuable for us? Very high. And this is obviously customized to the data that you've plugged into the tool. So you can see, for example, newsletter, only 5% of the traffic, but super valuable, right? The users who come from newsletters come a lot and they read way more content than the rest on my site, which is why it's so high, which is why the card here on the left, right, is saying focus on newsletters and the rest will follow. Another key traffic source is notifications, but I won't go into details because I would run out of time. Finally, a bit of speed, of course. How are your readers performing compared to other news organizations? I've mentioned how we went to see many, many news publishers and asked for Google Analytics account. On some of them, we actually asked them a second question. We asked them, can we collect all of your data to create benchmark anonymously? And more than, today we have access to a lot of accounts because I think it's a testament to the level of collaboration there is in this industry. And publishers said, sure, as long as you don't show my name, collect my data, create benchmarks, and let's see what it looks like, right? So what the tool does is once you've connected your data, and once again, if you connect your data to the tool, you're not part of the benchmark. We're not collecting anything from you, right? That part is done. So we take your loyal readers and your brand lovers, right? And we're going to compare your loyal readers and your brand lovers, so your most valuable users, to our benchmark. We're going to ask the benchmarks, how are those loyal readers and brand lovers performing, right? So I'm going to show you just one example. So on mobile, right, my site, since this is my site that you're looking at, I have 229,000 loyal readers and brand lovers on mobile devices. Their reader engagement score is 43 over 100. So whatever that means, I'm below average, right? The average being 50. So I'm clearly underperforming on something. So on what? That is the question. How are those readers performing compared to other news organizations? So my loyal readers and brand lovers on mobile devices, in terms of visits per reader, they have a red. You can see there is a red bar, right? Because they generate 2 visits per reader every 30 days. So my loyal readers and brand lovers on mobile, they generate 2 visits per reader. The average, the benchmarks, is at 2.6. So I'm a bit below the 2.6. But there is a best in class, right, who's at 3.6. So there's a publisher in the benchmark for that specific type of users, loyal readers and brand lovers on mobile. So essentially, loyal readers on mobile, they're not at 2, like me. They're not at 2.6. They're at 3.6, right? And this goes back to where we got our recommendations from, right? We got the recommendation because my team and myself, we know who that is. We know who the best in class is. And 3 years ago, we asked them the question, what are you doing that clearly the rest of your peers isn't doing? And that became one of the recommendations you see in the tool. Once again, the card is here to help you digest all of that and focus on the key points, right? But essentially, what I was trying to explain via this 45-minute presentation was everything is on the first page. Plug in your data, look at the recommendations that were surfaced for you and see if they make sense. I'm going to cut it here because we only have 8 minutes, and if there are questions, I mean, I hope it wasn't too much and that I was clear enough, more importantly. But if there are any questions, I'm super happy to answer them. Or even if you have comments, if you don't like this or if you like this, I'm super happy to answer.
And so, given our discussion at the start, I'm just thrilled that you weren't eaten by a bear halfway through. Glad to have you there. Mate, you spoke a little bit about sort of best-in-class publishers and some of those very generous publishers that allowed you to kind of look under the hood. You're probably not able to say too much about the specifics of those, but are there publishers in the world that people should look to for an example on this sort of stuff?
That's a great question too. We get that question a lot. Who are the publishers in the benchmark? So we have a mix of everything. What I was more surprised with is when we started, we thought by looking at the key brands that everyone knows in the news industry, we were going to figure out who the best in every category is, and that turned out to be completely untrue. So we essentially curated our benchmark, right? Where we were like, okay, let's add a magazine because they're amazing at that, right? And we believe as well, it's okay to compare them with a news publication because from a user perspective, the difference between, the New Yorker and another news site, apart from the content, the actual content, it's pretty hard to know if you don't know that they're an actual magazine, right? So we have some magazines, we have some local news, we have some national news. It's a bit of a mix, but everyone has been curated, right? And even if they were not, I'm going to go back to what I said during the presentation. All of it should be considered directional data. Even if it was perfect benchmark, there's always cues in data, right? You'll always find a way to say, well, that publisher doesn't really work like us, so they don't do the same thing. The question here is, does it change the actual recommendation, right? So for example, if your newsletter traffic, if we're saying your newsletter traffic is low and we say it's 3% of your traffic, if your newsletter traffic is actually 3, 4, 5%, does it actually change the recommendation that you should focus more on newsletter traffic, on growing sign up for that? We believe it doesn't, and that's why we usually say focus on everything as directional. I see some questions coming in.
Yeah, so feel free to take one. The one that I was going to ask you is in there as well, which is basically if you're feeling a little bit intimidated by the data, where do you start? Where are the ways that you can kind of get some quick wins, I guess, and get some confidence?
Yeah, so that's also why we start with the recommendations in the tool. Not everyone has a team of 55 analysts to go through the data, like some brands out there. Connect your data. Once again, it's for you and only for you. Read, everything has been made to be made simple. Hopefully you can bring someone from a more technical background who can also say, well, that's easy to do and that's super easy to do, and that one isn't. The recommendations are actually prioritized. So newsletter comes first because that's the #1 thing you should focus on, right? If there's only one thing that you should actually remember from this whole presentation is newsletters are important more than the rest.
Right, thank you so much. Is there a particular question that you want to pluck from the side there, or do you want me to read you another one?
I can look at a few. So there's one that says, is there an option to download the PDF report? So not a clean option. You can go to your browser and just print as PDF. That's something that we'll be adding soon, I hope. John did a great point. We have the Digital Growth Program. In the Digital Growth Program, they talk a lot about news consumer insight. It's a bit on many places. So if you want to dig with someone else, I would really invite you to check it out. There are some question maybe for next week with regards to the event tag. Okay, so there are some questions regarding tagging. The tagging conversation gets even less interesting than the data conversation because we're literally talking about tagging. One of the tools that I haven't talked about and I will talk more in next week is called News Tagging guide. Essentially, the purpose of news tagging guide, I'm not showing it to you because it's fully technical. It answers the question, what should we be what should we be measuring as news publisher in Google Analytics? Right, so in news tagging guide, we literally show you all of the topics, for example, newsletter signups or subscription conversion, right? We show you all of that, and then we show you how to get a little tag that you can copy paste on your site to make that happen in Google Analytics. When you do, actually, News Consumer Insights understands and identifies that, so it serves you better recommendations and better insight because we identify the fact that you have better data, essentially. I'll talk about it a bit more next week. It's a technical tool, so that's why I thought it wasn't like super relevant at this stage, but to discover News Consumer Insights.
And so that feels like a really good spot to just stop and also tell people about next week as well. So we've got real-time content insights, which is, I guess, the companion to this tool. Anntao is very kindly coming back exactly the same time next week to run a special session for us. So please make sure you're on that one. I'm going to throw back to Nick in a second as well. I've also dropped a link to the digital growth program as well in the chat so that you can sign up to that. It's been running for a few weeks now, but it's definitely not too late. You can still sign up for that one as well. And as we mentioned at the start, I think there's some amazing background. So I think the Sunraiser Daily needs a call out for having a bar in the newsroom. So I think it's definitely worth mentioning before we move on. And yeah, just get started with this stuff. Feel free to email Anntao. He's going to have his email up at the end, and you know, we're really happy to help you with this stuff. So
yeah, I'll actually send it via the chat. I mean, you have to remember my first name. That's the challenge. It's Anntao@google.com. Couldn't be simpler. I'm super happy to answer more questions. I hate my inbox with all my heart, but I'll do my best to answer in time.
That's terrible from an email company.
I know.
Nick, I'm going to bring you back in now if you're still there, Nick Hopkins, just to kind of wrap us up.
Yeah, thanks so much for your questions, everyone, and thanks for sticking with us for the full hour. And of course, thanks, Anntao, for your time. If anyone has a question that we didn't get an opportunity to answer, feel free to email or save it for next week. And thanks again for joining us. It's been a great session, and really looking forward to hearing about real-time content insights next week. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.